This video is going to cover a few algebra word problems. I can't really give you a recipe for doing word problems, but I can illustrate the way that I translate them word by word. So the first thing I do is I read the whole word problem. Plane can travel 1,015 miles in 7 hours against the wind. What does that mean? Who knows? Traveling with the same wind, the plane can travel 820 miles in 4 hours. How fast can the plane travel, and how fast is the wind? The last two questions give us a hint as to what our variables are. So I'm just going to set P as the rate of the plane. And I'm going to set W as the rate of the wind. And the governing equation here is distance equals rate times time. So against the wind means that the net rate is going to be the plane's rate minus the wind, and with the wind means that the net rate is going to be P plus W. In other words, if the wind is traveling this way and the plane is traveling that way, we have to subtract the wind's speed from the plane. Likewise, if the plane is traveling this way, we would add the two rates. So that tells us our system of equations. Essentially, we're going to have distance, which is 1,015, equal to the rate, which is P minus W, times 7 hours. And the other equation is going to be 820 miles, and the rate there is going to be P plus W, and we're going to accomplish that in 4 hours. So we have two equations and two variables. I'm not going to solve those equations because that's the topic of a different video. I'm just going to go on to two more word problems and set up the equations there. So in this problem, Lou wants to make 50 pounds of coffee, and in the end he wants it to be $3.35 per pound. Sumatran coffee costs $2.50 per pound, and Colombian coffee costs $3.75 per pound. How many pounds of each will he need? So I'm going to go ahead and make two variables, S for the number of pounds of Sumatran coffee and C for the number of pounds of Colombian coffee. And we have to think about what equations we can get from this. One of the equations is easy. 50 pounds of coffee. S plus C equals 50. Now we have to think about how are we going to take into account price. Intuitively, we should look at this and say, well, Colombian coffee costs $3.75 per pound. If he used only Colombian coffee, the mixture would cost $3.75 a pound. If he used only Sumatran coffee, the mixture would cost $2.50 per pound. So we got to be somewhere in between. Now, the total cost of the resulting mixture is going to be $3.35 times 50 pounds. That's the key observation, because whatever we spend on Sumatran coffee plus whatever we spend on Colombian coffee has to add up to this total cost. So our other equation turns out to be, let's see here, 2.50 times S plus 3.75 times C equals 50 times 335. So once again, we've got two equations in two variables. This method is also applicable to percent mixture problems. I'll just say that there, instead of cost, you're going to think about, if you're putting salt into water or something, you're going to think about the total amount of salt. But I'll stop there with the percent mixture discussion. Once again, two equations and two variables. This is a job for you, the viewer. Last equation, and I have some kind of weird page turn here. Jane invests $9,885 divided between two accounts. One earns 6% interest and the other earns 9.5% interest. So let's just call the first account A and the second account B. Hopefully you're noticing a pattern where I'm giving everything a name. That's the first thing you want to do in a word problem, is start your translation by simply giving things a name. You might end up giving things that didn't need a name. No harm done. Interest works like principal times 1 plus the rate of interest gives you the, new amount of money. In this equation, or in this problem, we're only asked about the interest, so we can actually forget about the 1 if we wanted. Hopefully you can see one of the equations is very easy. A plus B is 9,885. And now we just have to say, well, how much interest does she earn? She earns 696.35. And where does it come from? It comes from 0.06 times A plus 0.095 times B. So each of these is rate times principal plus rate times principal. If I wanted to use the 1 plus rate equation, I would have replaced 696.35 with the total amount of money, which comes from adding the interest to 9,885. That would be if I used this version, but instead I just used the interest. Once again, we made up two variables. We had to use the total information. In other words, she invested $9,885 total. And then we used the other bit of information by basically multiplying the amount in account A by 0.06 and the amount in account B by 0.095. Now you can also guess and look at this. 9,885 is about 10,000, and 696 is about 700. So overall, she earns about 7%. $700 versus 10,000. So your answer should shade more in the direction of A. That's my guess ahead of time, but once again, you the viewer, will have to solve these two equations in two variables on your own. I hope you learned something.